Alex Edelman is a fantastic comedian, and yet he's achieved so much in other realms that is not even what we lead with. He won the Outstanding Writing for a Variety Special Emmy. He won a special Tony, they couldn't even name it, for his show Just for Us. He was named Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People. And I have to say, I don't know how that influence was spreading in the first show I saw you perform last night, but they didn't seem terribly influenced by all your accolades.
No, they didn't. But by the way, that's part. So Mike is referencing very fairly. Also, thanks for that.
Yeah,
and thanks for having me. But yeah, look, some audiences don't want to buy what you're selling sometimes when you're working it out. And the truth is, especially at a club like the Comedy Cellar, which is my favorite club on the planet, you have to sometimes ask yourself, like, am I going to perform for this audience right now? Or am I going to develop this voice that I'm using for every audience in the future? Because the truth is, comedy is all about trial and error. And the truth is, like, a couple months ago, I came off stage. There are 4 rooms here at the Comedy Cellar. And I came off stage in the original one downstairs. And, like, there were 2 comics standing in the hallway. One of them was like, "Oh, man, great set." And the other one was like, "You didn't have a very good one, did you?" And I was like, "No." And the first comic was like, "Why?" And the other comic went, "He tried a new joke early and it kind of didn't work, so he went back to really safe stuff for the rest of it." It's like, yep, exactly. Exactly, because it was early on in the week, and, you know, you write over the weekend, you're all amped, and you fucking go up on Monday and you try your first new joke and it does, 70% of what you thought it might get, and you're like, well, here's an 100. And yes. So, like, it's tough. And the truth is, paradoxically, I think the reason this club has had staying power in a way that other clubs don't is that they sort of encourage that from their comedians, and sort of, and the truth is, I'm always really fascinated by the, like, liquid dynamics of an audience. Like, like, I went right before, not to show my cards too quickly, but right before my set last night, I came directly from a screening at MoMA of a documentary about the Mengele twins.
Oh, okay.
And I was like,
there were twins? Joseph had a twin?
No, Mengele did these macabre experiments on hundreds of twins and killed most of them. He was the camp commandant at Auschwitz. And so I spent an hour and a half watching this Auschwitz documentary, and I was like, I got to leave about 10 minutes early before the end of the documentary. Didn't know if there's a happy ending. 10 minutes before the end of this documentary to go do stand-up comedy downtown, and, like, was very quiet on the F train from MoMA down to West 4th.
Yeah, Jew taking a train.
And then, then going, very nice. We'll never get what it deserves, but it's a good one. And yeah, I really, by the way, I thought of a joke while I was in the documentary, where it was like, I just saw someone in the 70s bragging at a table going, our family was very important before the war. Like, our train to Auschwitz, it had seats. Like, that would be.
We had waiter service.
Yeah. Our train, when we took the train to Auschwitz, we went in first class, like. But
steerage, but just looking down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steerage.
Yeah, God, the cattle cars. But it was one of those things where I was like, okay, is the audience going to sense my foulness? Am I going to be a little more defensive with the audience?
That's not what was going on, because people should know you drop in and you are not watching the whole show, but Michelle and I were watching the whole show.
I didn't know that you saw the whole show.
So we saw Mike Yard, who's been on Funny You Should Mention, is great, always does great, and he didn't do great. He didn't do great with his broad range of material that appeals to everyone, that he does a joke about shaking a piece of shit out of his ass. He does a decent Trump impression. These are jokes that always get big laughs, and they were getting titters. Then the next comedian who goes, he's talking a lot about relationships, I forget his name, very relatable guy, but it was getting getting nothing. I'm like, this is a dead crowd. Then which happens, right? Which happens. Because if it's a small room and it's intimate, it can be great. But if there are 4 tables and one's drunk and one's not so great at English.
You can have 4 bad apples. To me, actually, I always say it's 4. 4 bad spaces in the room negate the whole room. Doesn't matter how big the room is. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. But this is what I was thinking. You use it to work out new jokes, but you also use it to tweak jokes, right? You did this joke about you questioning your Jewish identity.
I go on stage and I go, I'm not Jewish. And then it's usually that gets a laugh. And I go, I'm not Jewish. I'm a big fan of. And then I check my notebook. And then I go back to the microphone and go, Jesus Christ. And obviously the joke is that Jesus Christ is ubiquitous and does not require her writing down, and that people who are fans of Jesus Christ don't typically need to be reminded. And I said it and got nothing. And I went, oh, wow, it's going to be one of those.
And I think, how many times have you done that joke?
I mean, the funny thing is I've only been doing it for a couple of months, but I've been getting on stage a good amount. So probably like 50 times.
Does it work better than when I saw you in your next set, you put it second in the set? And I would think that that's a more natural place for it to work.
It's a bet, maybe, but I put it second because I have a little bit of a rapport with the guy who plays piano to bring people on stage, and I like him a lot. And Red and Lefty, the musicians here, like we always sort of banter back and forth. And frankly, like I love doing comedy here and developing my material. But like this club is my home. And like I started coming here when I was like 15, 16 years old to watch comedy, and I'm 35 now. So like to me, getting the chance to perform here, like I'm in my best mood. Even by the way, I came off that. I would say that set that you watched was as bad a set for me, laughs wise, as I've ever had. But like, if you buy a stock at 2 cents or something, and you get it to 3 cents. That's still an extra cent. Like it's
always money with you people.
Yeah. Well done. I mean, again, we'll never get what deserves from me, but because I don't traffic in stereotypes. Wow, there was a really great comic that I grew up with in Boston, and he said, I'm Latino, but I don't traffic in stereotypes. I'll steal any type of stereo.
That's great.
It was Tom E. Morello, I believe, is his name. It was really fucking
so
funny.
It wasn't doing it first, because my theory was that many people in the audience know you, but if they don't, just to give them 15 seconds where you seem perhaps stereotypically Jewy, and then you come out with "I'm not Jewish" might be better.
How very dare you? I don't know. Look, it's possible. Also, some jokes go first, some jokes go second, some jokes are closers, some jokes, fizzle around in the middle. Moving jokes around as I try things often yields. I notice that new jokes tend to spring out of segues. Mm-hmm. If there are any aspiring comedy writers listening to this, I noticed that you can actually start with probably 4 jokes, and moving them around and tying different connections to each other often reveal your voice. 4 or 5 jokes. The more jokes you have, the better. Looking at all your jokes on index cards and seeing what they all sort of have in common can sort of give your aesthetic a bit more of a like form.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can actually sort of see what you tend to talk about. My jokes are largely like anecdote, social observation, self-portraiture through recounting, which is a really fancy way of saying like I find out a lot about myself by talking about talking about other things that happen and what I find worth talking about. So like, I really love doing stand-up comedy, and I really love doing stand-up here. But yeah, I mix my joke placement around to try to see what comes out of the middle of it, and I try to riff as much as I can, and I record jokes and listen back to them the next day. Yeah,
the second set that I saw you do, which of course killed, you could tell based on an interaction with an audience member, it reminded you of a story that absolutely happened to you, and I hope was embellished.
It is a little bit embellished, yeah, but
it should be. I give no points off. I mean, I want to be as entertained as possible. It reminded you the circumstance of an audience member who was being a pain in the ass and wasn't giving you anything. You threw out the rest of the set and like, I'm going to tell an old story.
You should be present. Like you should have your bag of tricks within reach and be present there with it. When you're at your best, you're doing both. You're entertaining the audience and you're fostering whatever future thing is going to come. And so, yeah, this audience member who didn't want to talk to me reminded me of a time I didn't want to talk to somebody else. And so I riffed a closing story off of that, or remembered an old bit based off of that. It was the headphone. It's for my friend Rafi who's sitting here. It's that bit. But like it's a really, it's interesting. What are you saying? Yeah, you are fan.
She's arrived. Wait, let me turn the mic.
Yeah. You want to get in here, Rafi? No. But
that'll be the end credits scene, Rafi.
Yeah. Like, Rafi's sitting here in the chair instead of me.
Doing a TikTok dance or something.
Oh my God, heaven forfend. No offense, but like I had a really good chat last week with Eric Idle. You know, Monty Python.
Yeah, I saw that online. Sure,
it was fantastic. He was so great, and he talked about the sort of Monty Python ethos, which was all a commentary on British pantomime, where the audience is like,
right. Pantomime is something very specific in Britain. It's
very specific. The type of show.
Yes.
Where there's lots of drag and lots of men being like,
it's essentially vaudeville. Their version of vaudeville.
It's slapstick vaudeville, a lot of tropes. And when the villain comes on stage, everyone's like, boo. And the mom comes on stage, everyone's like, ah. Like it's a thing. And he talked about how Monty Python, who I never really considered through that lens, were just like pantomime college kids. And now they're pantomime college kids in their 70s and 80s, which is really, really cool. I said to him, we were talking about Spam-A-Lot, which is a musical he did for Broadway. And I said, it's amazing that you managed to unite musical theater fans and Monty Python fans, because those are two very different types of virgin. But he is a doll. And we talked a lot about joke structure through song, and like the way, songs work within a show is really distinct, but they move the story forward. And I think really great jokes tend to move a story forward. So I'm a really big believer in
if
that.
They're good, right? There was a time, Jerome Kern, Showboat, where the songs would stop the show and comment on what was happening. And then I guess Rodgers and Hammerstein with Oklahoma.
Is that true? I didn't know that.
From what I understand, there are some of those, Poor Judd is Dead, but there are other ones like the Auction, which is just drama as presented through song. And if there's no step back, it's an amazing innovation.
Those are the best. Those are really, really good. Yeah. And so jokes should do the same thing. If you're really, really looking for ambition here, your joke should advance something about you, a complicated thought, a love of weirdness and aesthetic. Yeah. I've got this new joke I've been doing about the Make-A-Wish Foundation, about how weird it is that it exists and how beautiful a thing it is. Like it is so, which is like they grant wishes for children who are very ill, which is great. It's just such it's a very odd thing to happen. And the number one grantor of children's wishes is John Cena.
Yes.
I'm just like, how big is John Cena with this demographic of kids? And like, and don't you even think that don't you think even John Cena's kids would be like, The Rock?
Yeah. Don't you think the second best wrestler is really pissed off and wants to get in good?
What do you mean
with
the second best? Like, I love John Cena. He's not like the greatest living wrestler. The Rock is. And then I have a line in there. I go, nothing beats The Rock except for paper. Right. But the end of it is, I go, they always send two guys into a room for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And so what I always end the joke with is I go, if it was me when they walked in, they'd be like, are there any celebrities you'd like to meet? I'm like, no. And they're like, well, you have a wish. And I'm like, you two kiss. And they're like, what? And I'm like, you two kiss. And they're like, I mean, you can meet like anyone except for Taylor Swift. She has a really healthy sense of boundaries, but like you can meet like anyone. And I'm like, I'm collecting moments, not people, like you two get. And then one guy's like, we're both in relationships. And I'm like, it's my last wish. And the other guy's like, I guess it couldn't hurt. And he's like, Rory. And the other guy's like, what? And like, so it's the idea that you would take a joke about the Make-A-Wish Foundation and turn it into two guys and a kid who's dying making them kiss. There's something like really specific about that. But like all of the best jokes have that really unique specificity baked in. And I also think that like, you know, I had a sort of experience with death in 2023. My best, the director of my show, my solo show that got all those nice plaudits, and probably my closest friend, this guy Adam, died. And so I've noticed a lot of my jokes now are about sort of like people who are dying, people who are running out of time, and it's really silly. But when I write them all down on index cards and look at them, I'm like, oh man, there are a lot of jokes here that are focused on like death and dying. And like,
did you start doing that, the writing them down as a means to get insight, or for some other reason?
Well, I noticed Birbiglia does it.
Yeah, and he consulted on your show too, right?
I mean, he produced it, but to even say produced is like, God, I'm overdue to see Mike Birbiglia. I haven't seen him in a couple of months, but like, there is no person besides Adam Brace and Alex Timbers who directed the special.
And Adam was your friend who died at the age of 43.
Yeah. Besides Adam and Alex, no one's had a bigger impact on me these last couple of years than Mike Birbiglia, who's so good at this art form that it might even be like a problem for him. Like, it's like one of those things where like people don't measure, like Michael Phelps was such, or Katie Ledecky, like
yes.
These dominant swimmers are so dominant at the specific thing that they do that like they are now competing against themselves to impress people.
Or I was thinking more like a Brian Eno, some great, brilliant musician.
I love Brian Eno as an example.
Who gets pulled out to be a producer on everything, and then maybe Brian Eno's like wants to be in a band at some point. Well, he's this uber producer. Well, he understands music from this level.
But you know, it's really weird because like it is actually, that is a absolutely amazing analogy. To be like, I got Brian Eno to produce my album, or I was lucky enough to have Brian Eno produce my album. But the truth is, like, no one that Mike is produced. Like, you could argue that Coldplay has more to offer than Brian Eno does, but at least in terms of their like broadness of scope and, you know, ambition of scope and things like that. But the truth is, Mike Birbiglia has, you know, I don't think I've got more to offer the world than Mike Birbiglia, but it is really interesting because if you look at the five,
I see what you're saying.
If you look at the five,
you're wrong, by the way. Both of you guys are great and should exist.
That's really nice. But like, if you look at the nominees for best, you know, for best writing in the category this year, one of them is Mike Birbiglia. And then there's me, whose show I produced. Jacqueline Novak, whose show I produced.
Was that a show or what?
It was fantastic.
Oh my God.
And like, you know, and John Early, who, you know, whose show he didn't produce, but who directed the Jacqueline Novak show that Mike produced, and, you know, Jimmy Kimmel's Oscar writing team.
Which is 45 people.
But a lot of them are brilliant. A lot of them are stand-ups. And Jimmy and Mike are like really close, and I would say are like a little bit influences on how, you know, each of them relate. I see a little bit of Jimmy Kimmel in the interview style that Mike has on his podcast. And it's just like, it's really interesting that this one sphere that Mike Birbiglia essentially presides over has had this like, you know, essential influence. I have influences from many other places: Maria Bamford, Brian Regan, you know, Moms Mabley, Bill Cosby before he died. Right before Bill Cosby died 20 years ago. He's rest in peace, Bill Cosby.
Oh my God.
Killed in 2002.
You just ask yourself, post Cosby show, there was so much more there for him to have tapped into, and he never got to.
Yeah,
so
struck down before his time.
Yeah,
I guess we'll never
Roscoe
know.
Arbuckle as well, both two of the greats. Who died far too young.
What a monster! It's so interesting. He's such a God. We don't have to talk about this, but like, but by the way, like when it is really strange because when I was younger, I was so influenced by that laid back storytelling style, and then I went to see him after the allegations came out. I saw his last show in New York. It was at Carnegie Hall, and some of the allegations had come out, and it was just ruined. It's just like bad.
No,
you know, it's like
hanging over it. Yeah.
But, you know, and by the way, he's in a class by himself in terms of like ruined comedians, but like
Oh, I thought you meant solitary confinement. But he actually got out. He's out.
The cause is loose.
The justice system working.
Yeah, we were just talking about that, but it's not this. But I mean, like, I don't want to be controversial here. I'm not crazy about. Let's not get into this.
If you want to dig down on his appeal, there's a case that there's anyway. Here's a couple.
Wow, Team Cosby over here.
I'm just saying the prosecutor offered a deal.
Snip, snip, snip. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So you've raised a number of things I want to ask you about.
Yeah, please.
One is, so we were talking about first placement in the show, second placement. We were talking about your friend Alex and
Adam.
Yep. Sorry. We were talking about your friend Adam and the Broadway show. It would seem to me, but tell me if I'm right, what you want is in a comedy set to wring the most laughs out of it and also, have a cohesive point. But with the Broadway show, you definitely have to get the most laughs. But to me, it's a structure thing. It's so very much about structure that makes it a show. Am I right about that?
Yeah, but also, like, truth is, I think we're in different arms races now. Like comedy, like jokes have to come first, but then there's narrative satisfaction. Like how satisfied people are by the story that's being told. And the truth is, people are going to always laugh laugh harder at jokes that come out of character that they recognize.
This is why Cheers is one of the most beloved shows of all time.
Well, people know the character. Yeah. Like Frasier is probably an even clearer example, right? Like my favorite joke in Frasier is he's at Niles is at a ball. The really uptight David Hyde Pierce character is at a baseball game, and he's got a radio Walkman. He's listening on his headphones at the ball game, and a sports fan next to him leans over and says, "What's the score?" And he goes, "West Side Story." And the joke is so funny because that character so well, and he's acting in like a certain way. So anyway, in doing the Broadway show, creating a story and then putting jokes in that reflect on the characters within the story, whether it be me, who's the guy at the center of it, or the neo-Nazis that are in. Oh, the show is about me going to this meeting of like white nationalists in Queens, and so like. Jokes that are based in narrative satisfaction give you a feeling of like wholeness, of like fulsomeness, but they also give you a much higher quality of laugh that really sticks with you. So like the truth is there are different types of laughter. There are different types of silence and different types of, and different types of focus. And so like
and different types of love.
I mean,
well, the Greeks had many different types
I was
of
like, which gross love is this gonna go? Yes, but there's
the love
Eros,
of two Make-A-Wish Foundation members.
Yeah. But there's Eros and Logos and like all these different types of things that are really, really complicated things to take into account. Once you have sat with your show for years, you start wondering not just about the laughs that you're getting, but how can you juice those laughs by giving a bit of information early on. Like I recently went to see Just For Us. Mm-hmm. Like someone's doing Just For Us.
Get the fuck out.
Yeah, Minnesota. There was this
guy.
Do
you have approval over who's cast?
Yeah. Well, I don't have approval over who's cast. I can approve the theater company that does it. Okay. So I said yes to this guy doing it in Minnesota, and people
are a Lutheran woman too.
I actually said that they don't need to be Jewish.
That's a good call.
I don't think they need to be Jewish, but that's a whole different thing. I think that interrogation of Judaism can. I think I said I want to see a woman of color do the show. Like I'd really love to see like Cynthia Erivo or someone like that do it. Cynthia's like a good friend of mine. I want to see her like. I don't think she would because she's busy being a huge talented star, but it would be sick. And but I went to go see this guy who's an actor, not a comedian, do the show. And by the way, he was doing a script from 2021, so some of the jokes in there were the same, but I hadn't buttressed the characters on the front end. So I was like God, I just wish the writing of this were better because. It might be Rabiglia says there are invisible pillars that you put early on in the show, so different jokes in the show work better later.
He gets that from Ira Glass and his idea of signposts in a This American Life story.
That's very possible.
And those guys are very good friends.
Ira's got a really, but by the way, Ira's a huge influence on the way that I tell stories.
Yeah, you've been on This American Life.
Oh yeah. I mean, like it is and by the way, being on This American Life is the most like special thing. It's fucking coolest thing in the world. But like,
How many times? How many times were you on?
I think I've been on. I can't remember if I've only been on once or if I've been on twice.
Yeah, I've been on 3 times.
Been on 3 times?
I'm just being.
Seriously, I don't remember.
But I just did it to be a dick.
No. I mean, like,
I literally just did it to be a dick.
Well, I'm glad it's made you into the global superstar that David Sedaris is.
Yes,
but Sedaris does.
But then I could spend my time cleaning up garbage in the English countryside.
But Sedaris really establishes his character really early, so you laugh so much at the stuff that he does.
Just like Niles. Just yes.
So he's like doing that invisible character work is huge, and you can do that in a big long set. But I try to do that in short sets too. I'll try to like softly call back to things that happen, and like what I like. There's a phrase that I love recently where I'm like, if I say something really boring, I'll go like, "Not to brag."
Yes.
And so if I do it multiple times in a set, I'll be like, sorry about all the bragging, and you don't have to make a big deal out of it because it's not really a bit, but it's a joke on the way to the joke. You can do it a bunch. And I don't know what it is, but it's just like really appealing to like create a sense of like, oh, who's this weirdo on stage?
Yeah. And when you do it, you gesture like towards the audience. It's very inviting, not to brag.
Yeah, sorry to brag. One was about taking a flight from Burbank to Seattle, and the other was about taking a crosstown bus.
Not to brag.
I'm like, sorry about brag. Or going to Graceland. And it's like, sorry not to brag. Because it's the king's house.
I do want to ask you, this relates to Just For Us.
Yeah,
and
please.
You have ADHD, yes?
What?
Yeah.
Sorry. I have ADHD.
So I think that I know you have a very fast mind, and sometimes your mind goes a little quicker than the audience, but also you might not know if the audience is with you, and some of the audience might not be with you. And this shows up in a couple of jokes, like when you talk about, is it Prince William's coke habit?
Yeah.
And
Prince,
the Queen,
Prince Harry's coke
Prince
habit.
Harry's coke habit. Sorry,
I don't want
William.
to besmirch the good name of Prince William,
right? Because he's doing
as opposed to the powder addicted lush of the younger brother,
right? Opposed to the giant Bolivian nose candy fiend Harry. But you say you have to realize his grandmother's on the currency.
Real quick, I have a connection to Prince Harry, which is that my friend Jack once did cocaine with him in a London nightclub bathroom. All right, that did not get the reaction that I wanted from you. I will sidebar for this. Prince Harry had a cocaine problem. It's the best thing. We don't talk about it enough as a culture. It's in the new book. It's fantastic. I don't approve of cocaine, but I love that Prince Harry had a cocaine problem. Because in America, we forget this. But in England, the Queen is on all of the money. So that means at some point, Prince Harry rolls up a picture of his grandmother to do drugs that he bought with other pictures of his grandmother. That will never happen to any of you. None of you can walk into Times Square after this and the drug dealer's like, excuse me, that'll be $300. And you're like, excuse me, here's a picture of my grandma at her 50th Jubilee Parade. And he's like, what? You're like, here's a picture of my grandma with Winston Churchill. And he's like, how'd you get this? And you're like, here's a picture of my grandma planning the death of my mom.
Now, some of the audience gets it, and some of the audience doesn't.
Those are great. Those are fun jokes.
And then there's another joke like that you do now about the Holocaust survivors and your mother's family. And
that's like a less than a week old, though, so I don't really know it yet.
But the only reason I bring it up, it's the same thing where you say she's 59, and sometimes the audience laughs immediately like that's too young for a Holocaust survivor, and sometimes they need to be led there. And so my question for you is that one of the things when you go in front of an audience, you don't know when they're going to get the joke, and then you have to make a decision about how much to fill them in?
Sometimes I can't backfill. Sometimes the step is too big for an audience. Sometimes it doesn't work. Or sometimes they get it and they're like, all right, keep building.
Yeah. And you need the audience to tell you that.
Every comedian, I believe this, someone who's overexposed to comedy by doing it or watching so much of it as you wait to go do it yourself. Comedians' brains work different from audience brains. And critics' brains work different from audience and comedians' brains, but slightly. So comedians and critics are closer together. Awards brains work different from audience brains. And the truth is, I do think that I've always tried to write for all 4 audiences. I try to write for audience members, peers, critics, and folks who look at things in a really jeweler's loop way and measure them against other stuff. Because why not? And also, I'm insecure. And I want everyone to think a joke has merit. But sometimes a joke only works with one or two of those constituencies. And there's a fifth constituency, which is me.
Yeah.
Which is, what do I find to be funny? And there are some jokes, and some of them are in just for us, to be fair. I know there's funny, like still in just for us after years. I know there's something funny there, but I haven't quite figured out a way to translate it. Or like, you know how like a big part of getting maple syrup out of a tree is like driving a spigot in the right place?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've never been able to like drive a spigot into the joke in the right place and like get that sweet, sweet laugh out.
But it's there. When we see it on HBO, we'll see examples
Maybe,
of that.
but like there are some things, but like you also have to trust that like eventually you can make one brain into another, right? Like you can invite an audience member to be a critic, or a critic to be an audience member, or a comedian to, I don't know, actually. I don't know how much a comedian's brain changes, and I think it has to do with the time you're watching a thing. And by the way, the reason I write for, I say awards, but people who judge things against other things, because it's a good way to look after the evergreenness of, it's a good way to look after the evergreenness of your offering, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good way to like think about whether or not your show is going to be considered good in, 2 years, 3 years. And you want shows to withstand the test of time in case you ever revisit them, or in case, not all shows do. My first solo show, I don't think stands up that well. It changed my life in a really significant way. I did a show called Millennial.
I spent the last year writing on a television show. At the end of this television show, I checked my bank balance, and I had $5,421 in my bank account. And this is how little I know about being an adult. I saw the bank balance on the ATM screen, and I thought to myself, with no irony, I should buy a house. Not a big house. One of those small $5,000 houses. How is any millennial ever gonna buy a home? How is any young person ever gonna own a home? It's maybe hate old people. I see a few of you in here tonight. I hate you. Because every old person in a cool city like this, or New York, or LA, or Boston, or Seattle are the same. Every old person's like, my house is worth $1 million, but when I bought it in 1968, I paid 11 raspberries for it. And every young person's like, I have 9 roommates! One of them's a raccoon with rabies. We'd love to get him out, but his name is on the lease. And every old person's like, I'm a librarian with a lake house. Up yours!
And then my second show was called Everything Handed to You, and that show stands up pretty well. And I think just for us, I don't know how it will stand up in 5 years, but I think okay, because we tried to take stuff out that would date it. But
yeah, this is exactly one thing I was thinking of, because as you were telling jokes about you have brother who's Israeli and your family's Jewish, and as you were telling jokes around the Gaza-Israel conflict, I could tell that the audience, beyond not being ready to go there, doesn't even know to laugh, where to laugh. So you were doing jokes about certain reactions to it. But it seems just about, and I want to bring it back to Just For Us, but it seems just about the hardest topic that I could think of in comedy. Like after 9/11, supposedly you couldn't make jokes about whatever, but no one was making jokes about America having deserved it for real, right? You could make jokes about certain phrases like, this is why the terrorists hate us. There's a great bit there. You can make jokes about American overreach, but at least in America, since comedians weren't playing shows for Kandahar audiences, at least in America, everyone was more or less on the same side. And with the Gaza conflict, it is so hard to figure out exactly where the audience is going to want to go.
There's another problem too, which is there's not a lot of comedy in being right.
Yeah, yeah.
There's not a lot of comedy in being bang on, as like British people say. And the truth is, to be wrong feels immoral. Even if you're pro-Israel, to be wrong in, the other respect feels immoral. And if you're pro-Palestinian, I would go out on a limb here, given that they've suffered many, 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 much, much, much more loss, and for a much longer period, even though the hostages are, indeed a really a sustained wound. It feels immoral to be making jokes in the face of an ongoing conflict that ranges in opinion from humanitarian crisis to outright genocide, right? So people are, I'm not labeling either of those things. I'm saying that's how people feel. And so
you're being descriptive, not normative.
Yeah. In a way that, by the way, part of that is preservation, but also part of that is like, there have been moments in this conflict where I'm like, okay, this is a humanitarian crisis. And there are moments in this conflict where I go, maybe it's a genocide. Like, it's truly, and my opinion wavers based on the information that I'm fed and based on the things that I've seen.
Yes.
And it's impossible to get an impartial media diet. And I don't know who to listen to. And I think it's the trickiest topic you could possibly take on.
I think so too.
But in that doubt, that's where there's comedy. In not being sure, that's where there's comedy. In not being able to talk about it, that's where there's comedy. And to be like, like there's a joke that I'm working on now that I've never like discussed before because it's still like sort of under like, but it's about a person who is Black, Jewish, and trans who's, arrested for putting up pro-Hamas posters. And I talk about that, but like, I also try to be like, well, what's the other side of that? So there's a joke about that, but then there's a joke that I'm like, okay, but what's the other perspective on it? And the truth is, I think most people, I'm answering your question, I promise. I think most people actually think that things aren't like black and white. And like the right opinion on the opinion that someone might have about one of these like Queers for Palestine people is that they would not be welcome in Gaza. They would be, in harm's way for many different reasons. And the thing that I think is like interesting about that is that these people know that. And so the idea that they're naive about that is probably not real. And in that, there's great fodder for a joke.
Right.
Because that's something that most people would recognize but isn't acknowledged. And something that's recognized but isn't acknowledged is great. Like, Just for Us is about the Jewish relationship to whiteness being more complex than what you would see in the media. Because on one hand, I'm white enough to get into that room of white nationalists, but not white enough to be considered white by any of the people in that room. So that paradox is like a really great way to, so like the paradox, I'm putting this together in real time. So I'm sorry if it's like a little messy because I've never talked about this joke, but the paradox of someone who is a queer for Palestine and, in air quotes, sticking up for Palestinians, and that person having some bravery.
Yes, this is a word you use in the joke.
Yeah. Like, that is, like, there is comedy in that paradox. And the truth is, this is stuff we want to talk about. Like, in some ways, in the days after 9/11, how could you go on stage and talk about your shoe size or chicken restaurants or those bars that were popping up around the turn of the century where it was cold on the inside and you would go in and sit there in a coat and drink a cold martini? Like, those things existed, but they all existed then in relation to 9/11.
Yes.
And so if I'm a Jew grappling with the situation in the Middle East, wondering if like the Israel I grew up with is, means something different now, wondering if the relationship that my family and my friends, have to it is splintering, like, how can I talk about anything else besides like this big current thing that's filling my aperture?
But do you think Just for Us, it will stand the test of time and be performed by different regional theater groups and maybe a black woman at some day because it's quality. But do you think it's conception and questioning of anti-Semitism is a bit of a time capsule in that it took place before October 7th? And I don't even know if the word Zionism appears in the show at all.
I mean, it
or
does,
even the concept.
It does one time as a sort of sarcastic remark. And I decided not to change it after October 7th. Because also words and context change all the time.
Yeah.
Who knows? God forbid somebody, you do a joke about Casamigos tequila, and then somebody walks into an alcohol shop in Tulsa holding a machine gun, steals 5 bottles of Casamigos, and kills everybody in the shop, and there's a Casamigos killer, and now you're holding the bag on camera for alcohol. I'm not besmirching the good name of Casamigos tequila.
And we should thank our sponsor, Don Julio, as always. Never.
And I love all the founders of Casamigos. They're fantastic. I think Clooney's one of them. So I
don't want to get wrong with Clooney.
I don't want to get, I'm just saying that not like Prince Harry, who we've thrown under the bus multiple times in this podcast. But the point is, words and cultural context shift all the time, and it's up to the person performing it in that moment here's my hard and fast rule for this, which is a show and a joke should be conversant with the moment that it's in and not beholden to it. So, right, people after October 7th were like, you should address, the situation in Israel or the situation in Gaza. And they were doing it from different perspectives. Like, certain people called me and were like, you need to stand up for Israel right now in your show. And there are people who called me and was like, you need to speak out about what's happening to the Palestinians. And I was like, that's not the show. But I put a line in at the beginning that didn't make it into the special, but I really love the line. I said, I come out, go, hi, thanks so much for coming. One quick thing before we start. I said the show is about, there's a bit in the show about Jewish identity and a bit about anti-Semitism, a bit about Israel. And I want to, and to that, I just want to say, when I was in high school, I saw John Updike give a talk. He's like a novelist. So John Updike give a talk. And I know you know who John Updike is. It's for the listenership. Pesca. You saw John.
They're not that bright.
Yeah,
good,
yeah,
thank you.
I said John Updike give a talk, and Updike said that if you're lucky enough, at some point in your life, the work that you create might find itself conversant with the times in which you live. And then it would pause and go, well, call me Mr. Lucky. Yeah.
That's great.
And it just let you know that I knew what was going on, and that these things are relevant. And that part of it, I think the thing that people underestimate is part of the work of a comedy show or a comedian is to put something out there for an audience to examine themselves and converse with themselves. Like, to go, here is a little nugget of how people are talking about Israel and Palestine. Discuss amongst yourself. Here's a thing that I've observed. It's not a thing that I necessarily believe to the exclusion of other things. The hardest part in terms of talking about Israel and Palestine that I have found is that it's impossible to address. It's gone on for so long and has been discussed so much. The context is all knotted together. So you can't talk about the situation in Gaza without considering everything that's come before it, right? And that's pretty hard to do in a joke. And you can't talk about, college students protesting like the situation in Gaza without the discussion of how Americans view things through a post-colonialist lens. Again, hard thing to talk about in a joke, not just because of the topic matter, but because of the way you do a joke doesn't always, if you only saw one bit of the joke about the kid protesting protesting on behalf of the Palestinians, you'd be like, well, that's offensive from a pro-Palestinian lens. But if you only saw the second half of the joke about how that kid is brave, you'd be like, well, that joke is offensive from a pro-Israel lens.
Right.
And so
not every joke has to be equally balanced. You can even have one joke, or do you think it does?
I think jokes that ask questions and pose questions are better than jokes that propose answers.
And you think those questions should be fair?
I think
you can't put your finger on it.
I think it's hard for me personally
Yeah.
not to wonder about the paradox of somebody protesting on behalf of a trans Jewish black person protesting on behalf of Palestinians without considering the risk to that person. And
so you're engaged in a very ethical project here. Does that hold you back?
Yes and no. In the sense, one, if you can walk that tightrope for a long time, then you have something really interesting. On the other hand, it's really hard to walk that tightrope. I was going to do a show about Israel and Palestine long before October 7th and talked about it as my next project for, the 3.5 years Just For Us existed before that. But it's much harder now. Also, I want people to enjoy themselves. Like, I'm not out there to fuck with people. Like, I don't want people are going to get a babysitter. They should have fun.
Yeah. Are you ready to get bummed out by the geopolitical musings of Alex Edelman?
But the truth is, like, Adam, before he died, was a really big fan of this quote that he attributed to the coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Bruce Arians.
Okay.
Which is no risk it, no biscuit. So, like, you got to go out there and, like, bomb on a Tuesday or bomb on a Wednesday, wherever you saw me, in front of a dead audience to, like, get at something. Because, by the way, if a joke works in that room, then that joke is working anywhere else.
Yeah.
And, like, 1 or 2 jokes worked in that room last night. I was like, okay, those jokes are keepers. I say 1 or 2 jokes in the span of 15 minutes. Not exactly a great batting average, but like your swings are pretty good. So yeah, it holds you back. And also the truth is my opinion changes. My opinion about Israel is different than it was on October 7th, 2023. And my opinion about the ways people speak about Israel is different than how it was, when we last spoke.
Yes.
And also, I find huge bad faith discourse that's influenced by how people feel about Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or, their own position within anything. So, like, it's tough.
Yeah. And to paraphrase what Bruce Arians was saying, there's this other saying, you miss every shot you don't take. And that was, of course, said by Yahya Sinwar.
Yeah.
And
my God.
Cut.
No. So, I mean, it's, like, these also, here's the other thing.
Wait, I could change it to the IDF to make it balanced.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not digging myself
But,
a hole
but
here.
the truth is, these jokes are like the other thing that's tough from a craft perspective on Israel and Palestine. There aren't that many words you feel like comfortable laughing at. The reason Nazis are so great to laugh at is you can laugh at almost like it's so far in the past. Also, people have a little more. And by the way, there's a perception now doing jokes about Israel and Palestine is easier now than it was 3 months ago, which actually troubles me a little bit because it's still like, it's still like a problem that's in our face. But yeah, a lot of like.
And a crazy ass plan for Gaza resettlement. I don't even know if that helps a comedian.
There's
it's so stupid.
I mean, but by the way, that actually, the more things that happen, besides like, my actual opinion on Israel and Palestine changes a lot, but I'm broadly in the camp of there's got to be a way to figure this out without innocent people getting killed. There has to be a way in the 21st century for us to figure this out without teenagers getting taken hostage and Moabs being dropped on toddlers. Like, I don't think that's, and by the way, I think almost all reasonable people believe that. And if you don't believe it, I think you are largely traumatized by having skin in the game, which I respect, or are arguing in bad faith, which I don't.
Yeah.
And so, like, my opinion roughly like centers on that, but I do think there's lots of reasonablenesses in those, in those like vicissitudes.
Well, Alex, let me tell you, I enjoyed talking to you today, but I enjoyed watching you last night. And obviously after the second show where you killed and the crowd went wild, it's easy for me to say, oh, I love Alex Edelman. After the first show, I turned to my wife and said, that guy is talking about everything I'm thinking about. So maybe it was me congratulating myself, but
really?
liking what you called the worst set in 50 years. But this is why I think so highly of you.
This is this club. It's a credit to. I think this club has look, think about the comedy. This is the last thing else. Obviously, we're winding down, but like comedy institutions, they don't like a ton of them don't really exist anymore. Like, not a ton of us worked comic strip, which was been around a real long time, and Caroline's is closed, and Caroline herself is still around, which is amazing. But like, the Comedy Cellar, I think because of its like commitment to like progress, and like because Noam kind of as a lodestar, which by the way I don't always agree with.
Yeah,
like. This place makes it like this place is an environment where you actually can go and like talk about all this shit, and like you're expected to entertain people, but like but also like do something with your time on stage. It's like pretty good litmus test for comics who are doing stuff other than like just talking about like cunnilingus. Not that there aren't great like cunnilingus comedians. I can think of two, but like yeah, I think that there's like a real. There's a lot of really great stuff at this club, and so it makes it all possible.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, bud.
Before we started, we were exchanging, or since you're the comedian, you were telling me Jewish jokes, but I'll tell you one.
I don't like many of them.
Okay, tell me if you don't like this, and if not, why.
I'll tell you.
And stop me. Like first of all, what's the chances you think you heard it? This is not a joke.
99.5.
Right? Okay. So it's a German, a Jew, and a Frenchman are walking in the desert. Do you know it already?
Go ahead.
Okay. And the German says, wait, let's get the German
thirsty.
accent. I'm so thirsty. I am so tired. I must have beer. And the Frenchman says, I'm so thirsty. I'm so tired. I must have wine.
And the Jewish person says, I'm so thirsty. I'm so tired. I must have diabetes.
Okay. Well, let me do that. Good joke or bad joke, and why?
I mean, I'm not crazy about it, but on a scale of intolerable to tolerable, I mean, like, I wouldn't retell it, but I mean, like, yeah, it's not the pessimism. No, it wouldn't hit mine.
So it's in the Museum of Joke Tolerance.
It's in the Museum of Joke Tolerance. Yeah, there you go. I honestly think that most Jewish jokes, they play on this stereotype that Jews are, like, anxious. Mm-hmm. And it's weirdly, like, not my experience of Jews across the board, because I know a lot of Jews who are not, like, just the same New York Ashkenazi. Right. I'm pretty anxious, but whenever anyone's like a Jew, like to me, I like Jews being my favorite Jewish joke besides the ones I was telling you. There's one where this guy is on a desert island, and do you know this one?
No. Well, I don't know.
A Jew is on a desert island, and they finally rescue him. And there are 3 structures on the island. And they're like, what are these structures? He goes, well, that's my house and that's my synagogue. And they go, what's this third structure? He goes, that's a synagogue I would never go to in a million years.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Whereas it's like the need to be superior
yeah.
is something that I find really funny in Jewish jokes. But jokes about Jews having anxiety. I also like, there's a joke I love. It's not a Jewish one. It's these 2 priests are driving down a highway and they're pulled over by a state trooper. And the state trooper looks in the car and sees 2 priests and goes, sorry, Padres. We're looking for a couple of child molesters. And the priests look at each other and they go, we'll do it.
That's good.
It's really
That's good.
Isn't that a great? We'll do it.
Yeah. So a guy is outside the UN and he's going up to people, the delegates, and saying, "Excuse me, what's your opinion on the food shortage in Sudan?" Mm-hmm. And he goes up to the Russian and says, "Excuse me, what's your opinion on the food shortage in Sudan?" And the Russian says, "What's opinion?" And he goes up to the American and says, "Excuse me, what's your opinion of food shortage in Sudan?" And the American says, "What's the food shortage?" Goes up to the Israeli, says, "Excuse me, what's your opinion on the food shortage in Sudan?" And the Israeli says, "What's excuse me?"
Oh, I love jokes about how Israelis are being rude. That's a really good.
But it's not funny. But
no, it is. I mean, it is funny with better delivery. It'd be fun. No, it's right. My favorite
also
joke.
Sudan probably. Wait, Sudan? Is that where we're going?
I like the style of joke where it's really long and there's like a weird thing so this is a joke that Also, one of my favorite things to do is hear a joke and then embellish it or change it and like sort of find a way. Street jokes, for anyone listening or watching, a street joke is a joke that belongs to nobody. They're just from the streets. And their etymology is uncertain or loose form. And they're kind of found. And so the art of them is in the telling and the embellishment. And so, you know, I would never tell a street joke in my act unless I wrote it. But a street joke has the form of, it's not a first person, this would happen to me. It's a man walks into a bar, a guy is talking to someone outside the UN, that type of shit. And
as if the guy talking to someone outside the UN, that's one of the classic tropes.
One of
you
the
got your
classic tropes.
desert island, you got your rabbi and priest walk into a bar.
But you can make your own spin, like, all right, so these two guys are standing next to each other at a pro-Palestinian rally.
Okay.
And one's holding a flag and says, an Israeli flag, and says, if you support the state of Israel, donate here. And the other one is holding a Palestinian flag and has a bucket that says, if you support, you know, the cause for Palestinian liberation, give here. And of course, people are giving to the Palestinian and giving, you know, really giving looks to the, you know, to the guy holding the Israeli flag. And finally someone takes pity on this guy and goes up to this oblivious guy and goes, hey man, you know, I don't agree with your politics, but if you want to make money, you know, maybe you should try asking for it somewhere else. And the guy holding the Israeli flag looks at the guy holding the Palestinian flag and says, get a load of this guy telling the Rubenstein brothers how to work a rally.
Telling the Rubenstein brothers.
Is how to work a rally.
Yeah,
and so the truth is, you know, that joke stands a better chance of people laughing at it, but for different reasons, right? Like if you there is a possibility that you would laugh at it if you were like extremely pro-Israel for the like industriousness of the people within the story. And, you know, but there's also with some words changed and futzed around, you'd laugh at the sort of underhandedness of it if you had a more pro-Palestinian perspective, right, or
because with Jews it's always about the money.
But the truth is most protagonists in jokes are the good guys or the guys that you're rooting for, and there's something earthy about a joke. So you rarely like it is interesting, but like, you know, is that
true? The protagonist mostly good guys. I'm thinking, you know, Superman stopped being an asshole. I'm thinking we could just go right to punchlines and just forget the jokes. But is that true? I guess it is true. It's sort of the stand-in for the stand-up comic who wants to essentially be
the protagonist. Can you think of a joke where the protagonist isn't someone you're sort of rooting for, unless they've been so thoroughly depersonalized, right? Like priests in that joke about child, like you're laughing at the concept of you know, a priest. You know, I told a joke once to a friend, and then we can probably move on to stuff that's not just joke theory, even though I could literally talk about it all day. I just know it's not that interesting to other people. But like,
well, I started a show kind of about it, so somehow I'm into it.
Oh well, fine. I mean, like, but you know, I just realized what your show's about. But like the idea of oh fuck, that's cool.
Thanks, man.
I did it because I like you.
I said yes.
I was like, I said yes because they were like, Mike wants to. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do whatever he wants. But like, the idea of where was I? Talking about joke theory.
The protagonist. People get into the Israeli-Palestinian flag joke because normally they identify with the protagonist.
That's right, and then the dehumanization of something as more of a concept. I was talking to. I remember what I was talking about. I was telling someone a joke, and the funny thing is, I remember the exact beats of the joke, but it's this older gentleman in his 80s, and he can't satisfy his wife, and he goes in to the doctor with his wife and is like, we're trying everything, it's not working. And he's like, all right, when you have sex next, hire a young man to stand over you guys waving a towel.
Yes.
And this old man, who in the joke I've heard is Jewish.
Yes, I've heard the joke takes place in like the rural region of Ukraine, and he tells them to go into Lviv to get one of the studs.
To get a towel, yeah.
Yes.
You had a young man to stand over you waving a towel while you have sex, and nothing, you know, works. And then they go back into the doctor, and the doctor's like, how about this? You wave a towel, and the young man has sex with your wife. And so they do that, and the wife is, really is having an orgasm, and the old man looks at the young man and goes, you schmuck, that's how you wave a towel. And the funny thing about that, people, and I remember telling it to a friend of mine who was like, why does he have to be Jewish? Why does this cuckolded man have to be Jewish? And I was with Genji, who's a really good friend of mine, a TV writer, Genji Cohan. And both of us at once were like, it's not the cuckoldry that's the Jewish part. It's the optimism. It's the idea. It's the self-belief, the paradoxical self-belief in the face of all evidence to the contrary, because to me, that's like an integral part of the Jewish experience, right?
Yes.
Like having self-belief in the face of all the contrary evidence.
That guy could definitely be a Shalom Aleichem character, right?
1,000%.
Yes.
Or Chalmnik, right?
Right,
Someone
one of
from
the fools. Yeah, and he's mistaking what's going on, so that's his foolishness.
But there's a paradox. Anything that's high and low at the same time is always really, really funny, and always really, really good fodder for jokes. Something, or especially a street joke, something that is both a big lofty concept, but comes down to an earthly misunderstanding.
Right, because the punchline will get people by instinct. Like, it's the punchline.
Yeah.
And then the thought about it, to a certain percentage of the audience, you really start thinking about it and you appreciate it on the next level.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that there's also like, something that hints at the both simplicity of human beings and the simplicity of human beings is really, really big in terms of like my favorite joke. My friend Morgan Evans told me this one is a gorilla is walking through the jungle. Do you know this one?
No, I love it.
Oh,
though.
wow. This is
yeah.
like a really, like, as Morgan told me the joke, don't know where he got it, but I've never heard it from anywhere else. So I love it. And I like embellish it a little bit, but gorilla's walking through the jungle, and he hits the end of the jungle, and he opens up the vines, and stretched out in front of him is a savanna. And the first thing he sees is a lion with its head caught in a log. And he goes, well, this is like my one chance to like fuck a lion. And so he starts, and the lion's like really unhappy. By the way, if you're speaking to a younger audience, or like the sexual assault part makes you uncomfortable, as it very well should. Sometimes I say just like beats the shit out of the lion, like he's kicking the lion. And
like if you're playing colleges, he'll be beating the shit out of the lion.
I wouldn't, you know what? Frankly, if I'm being honest, I love the form of the joke, but I actually hate that he like just, I hate that part of. So yeah. But like, let's say he's kicking the shit out of the lion. And actually, let's cut that whole part. I'm gonna start over.
Okay.
All right, you cool with that? Just for safer,
Also, if I could just add my 2 cents, it'd be great if you introduced.
No, this is going to happen after we do the joke theory.
And then you'll put that at the beginning.
Or no, I think I'll have my intro 20 minutes in. But go ahead.
Sure. I don't know.
It'll be cool.
Some podcasts are. All right. So this gorilla's walking through the jungle, and he hits the end of the jungle, and he opens up these vines, and there's this lion with his head caught in a log, like, in front of him. And the gorilla's like, oh shit, it's my one chance to like beat the shit out of a lion. So he starts like kicking the lion and like having the time of his life, and like battering him with like a stick and shit. And the lion's like roaring his head off, and the gorilla's like just kicking him in the guts. And then the lion breaks the log, and the gorilla's like, oh shit. And he runs in the jungle. He's pushing like vines and, trees and crap out of the way. And he hits this like little human encampment. And there's a guy there with like a safari hat and a safari outfit. And he's sitting in a rocking chair. He's got like a safari mustache and glasses and a pipe, and he's reading the newspaper. And the gorilla like bonks him over the head and drags him in the tent and puts on like the hat and the glasses and the mustache and the pipe and the outfit and sits back down in his rocking chair and is reading the newspaper. And the lion comes booking through, and he sees the gorilla sit in the chair, and he goes, hey! And the gorilla's like, hey! And the lion goes, do you see a gorilla come through here? And the gorilla goes, oh, you mean the one that kicked the shit out of that lion who had his head caught in the log? And the lion goes, oh my God, it's in the papers already? It's a fucking great joke.
It's a great joke.
It's a really great joke, because ultimately the joke is that humiliation is the thing we're most concerned about at the end of the day, right? Like that's a really beautiful.
I thought the joke was that in the jungle, the dying of the news media hadn't
Shut the
filtered
fuck
out
up.
yet.
Shut the fuck up.
And so normally I just like he reads the newspaper is just kind of a throwaway detail and it becomes the whole joke.
Yeah, well, obviously, all the best ones are, there's, all the best ones are jokes where the detail at the end is, Albert Brooks is great at these jokes, and
Yeah.
And-
You know what the Rubenstein brother joke remind me of? And it's all based
please
on
go for it.
It's all based on what is a joke, joke theory. It's a misdirection of expectations. It's the subtle disappointment of expectations. And so whatever you're expecting to happen with the Palestinian flag and Israeli flag guy, once you learn they're brothers, it rewards the listener and they go, and there's a joke. I'll just cut right to the punchline since I assume you know all jokes. Oh, that's just the Gallagher brothers. They're getting drunk again. You know that one? So to backfill it was two guys in a bar. Hey, where are you from? I'm from Dublin. You're from Dublin. Let's have a drink.
Yeah.
What street in Dublin? I'm from.
It's the Gallagher brothers are getting drunk again. Just ignore it. Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
That's
right. So it's very similar to the Rubenstein brothers, and it both, because they're brothers, maybe I thought of it, but it rewards the listener for getting it, for saying, I see what's going on here. And that's an element to a lot of jokes.
You can fuck with some street jokes, though, to be like, the twist on the expectation. My friend PJ Vogt is a really brilliant podcaster, probably one of the best in the...
My friend PJ Vogt. Let's
You know
talk about
PJ?
our friends PJ Vogt.
You know PJ?
Of course.
PJ's a genius. PJ asked me once, I think this is his thought, actually. He said, the first joke we're ever told is peekaboo.
Mm-hmm.
And everything after that is a variation.
Yeah.
And by the way, the joke I always tell for children, which is a perfect joke, I think, is what's a pirate's favorite letter of the alphabet?
Wait, say it again.
What's a pirate's favorite letter of the alphabet?
Go ahead. Oh, if I'm a child, R.
You'd think it'd be R, but 'tis the C that he loves.
It's great.
It's a brilliant joke.
Yeah.
And it explains the building blocks of jokes being surprise. And I told my friend Sophie Black, who's a brilliant comedian.
See, I don't know Sophie Black. I only know PJ.
She's
Podcast.
So Sophie is so. By the way, Sophie makes amazing radio in the UK, and her husband David Babani is like a really brilliant theater producer. And they have this kid, and I remember Zach, and I told Zach this joke, and watch this like little British kid who's hysterical, to be fair, watched his like gears turn. And the funny thing is, if you hang out and if you tell a kid that joke and wait an hour, they will come up to you to try to tell you a joke of their own sometimes. But this kid, and also this kid's being raised in a comedy house, but the joke explains the building blocks of which is that the essential element is a surprise based on this reversion of expectation, right?
Yes,
so peekaboo is like, I'm gone. No, I'm not. So like, yeah,
That's right.